Video game generations, we've seen them come and go 8 times. It's usually a happy time, like when you saw little Billy getting so excited about his new N64, though for developers, it's a whole other world. New consoles meant learning about an entirely new system. And this was exactly the issue the RE devs faced with the next entry. Though, hold that thought for just a sec. Let's start from the beginning. How did things end up in such a rut? Well, in part 1, we talked about the rise of survival horror and how high Resident Evil 1 and 2 had set the bar. Hence, fans were expecting nothing short of spectacular with the third installment, and Capcom wanted sales to hit the millions once again, so the pressure was on. It's now 1998, and the first build of Resident Evil 3 was well on its way for the PS1. Set on a luxury cruise liner, the plot was about Hunk attempting to recover a sample of the G-Virus. Everything was going smooth as silk until Sony dropped the bomb, the PlayStation 2. So now what? By the time the team was done with RE3, PS2 would be in the spotlight and PS1 would be old news. Rushing the game out for the new system without learning it would be catastrophic. The only solution was to drastically increase the size of the RE3 dev team, so there'd be enough manpower to push it out before the PS2's debut. And that's exactly what they did. There was a spin-off game being developed at the time called Resident Evil Gaiden. Left with no choice, manager Yoshiki Okamoto ordered them to team up with the RE3 team and turn Gaiden into Resident Evil 3. With the clock ticking, the gears in Shinji Mikami's head started turning as he was brainstorming new ways to scare the players. What he came up with? Paranoia. At the time, there was breaking news about stalkers in Japan. Yeah, you heard me right, stalkers. But hey, it's Japan. Many news outlets and TV programs were covering it. This acted as a huge inspiration for Mikami, since stalkers were a perfect form of constant paranoia. Way to capitalize on bad news, but for a good cause. Of course, this monster that followed the player around would have to be as hideous and intimidating as possible. To achieve this, the team took the final boss of RE1, Tyrant, and gave him more intellect, thus giving birth to our stalker of RE3, Nemesis. But we're not done. If you recall from part 1, music is something extremely important to Mikami, and the Nemesis theme was no different. Played at the least expected times, it was the only cue for players to know their stalker was coming. Inspired by Jaws and Pavlov's experiment, Mikami would occasionally have the music play, with no Nemesis appearing just to mess with our minds. The game was released in September of 1999, called Resident Evil 3 Nemesis. Events take place after Jill escapes the mansion in RE1. After returning to Raccoon City, a huge zombie breakout occurs. Teaming up with Carlos Oliveira, a mercenary working under Umbrella, they attempt to escape the city.
We should work together.
Now, what is the most eye-catching thing about RE3? I mean, the first thing that makes you go, whoa. I'll take a guess. Jill's outfit? This radical change in appearance did raise some public eyebrows at first. Seeing how Tomb Raiders swept the world in the past, 3 years solely from the wonderful gameplay. Of course, the game was wonderful, but it also further proved that sex sells. The official explanation to Jill's new outfit, according to director Kazuhiro Ayoma, is that they wanted Jill to stand out from the background, and so she could look cool and sexy. The game as a whole was very well received. There are many new welcome additions like quick turning, dodging, and custom ammo. The past 2 RE titles may have made some feel claustrophobic being stuck in one place the entire game, but RE3 makes you run around a city. The backtracking can get tedious, but it's a better setting overall. The most notable addition is branching plot points. These parts add tension, especially when it happens moments before Nemesis is about to rip you in half.
The first-person view has always been a hot topic during the early development stages of the first Resident Evil. In fact, if the PS1 was stronger, that's where the series would have headed, though it's never too late to try. The storyline was written by Noboru Sugimura, whom also wrote the one for RE2. On top of that, various zombie models were rehashed from there as well, with minimal changes. Even though this game wasn't on rails, the devs decided to make use of the popular GunCon accessory for the PlayStation. Unfortunately, only the Japanese and the Europe versions were compatible with it. Due to the Columbine massacre at the time, Capcom decided against the idea of putting toy guns in players' hands. But little did they know how bad the controls would turn out because of this. The game was released in August of 2000, called
Resident Evil Survivor.
Events take place a short while after RE3 on Sheena Island. An agent called Ark Thompson was sent to infiltrate an Umbrella facility. However, through a rough confrontation with the commander, he loses his memory. He then travels the island trying to remember everything and finally escape. Many fans regard Survivor as the worst in the series, and I can understand. The game had serious potential, but it was dragged down by a plethora of flaws. First off, I'll admit, the plot is pretty interesting. It had an awesome flash forward scene in the beginning that kept players wanting to find out who Ark really was and what the heck was going on. There was a sense of mystery. Too bad it's hard to take any of it seriously, thanks to the classic awful voice acting and rigid looking character models with awkward movements. The bland environment does not help either. Even if you found a way to ignore all of that, you'd still have to drag yourself through the off-rail shooting. Because the GunCon is not compatible, you're stuck with some pretty iffy controls. Movement doesn't feel fluent, and aiming with analog sticks isn't the most accurate either. Overall, what could have been an awesome spin-off title turned out to be quite a disaster.
It was all my fault!
After this lackluster title, fans were a bit thrown off, but luckily, they won't have to wait long before Capcom restores their faith in the series. Remember what a brilliant sequel Resident Evil 2 was on the PlayStation a couple years back? If you do, then it's no surprise that Sega wouldn't want to miss out on an opportunity for a port to their own console, the Sega Saturn. However, due to its inferior hardware, Mikami and his team could not produce the port. In turn, development on a completely new RE title began. Its name? Code Veronica. Because this was the first time ever that Resident Evil stepped outside the realm of PlayStation, the team decided to make it unnumbered, but they had no intentions of creating a spin-off. In fact, they wanted to avoid simple rehashes according to manager Okamoto. They wanted Veronica to be a new experience, something different, something special. First big change was the setting. No more police station, no more city ruins, no more America. Looking around for inspiration, the devs began researching Gothic horror, which included European castles, mansions, ruins, and ghosts. Second big change was the narrative. Ever since RE1, the series has always been about the shock value. This time around, the team was aiming to create a psychological thriller. Rather than focusing on cliché big evil corporation trying to take over the world, Veronica was about the madness of one man and the collapse of a prestigious bloodline. Definitely much more spooky and interesting. Third big change? Cinematics. Claire was nothing more than a university student with an interest in motorcycles before the events of RE2. By the end of it all, she pretty much became a zombie warrior. Taking this into account, Mikami did not hold back with the action sequences. Some were so epic that they're comparable to John Woo movies. It is out of the norm for Resident Evil, but I guess it's not such a bad idea considering Capcom was opening up the series to a whole new audience. The game was released in February of 2000, called Resident Evil Code Veronica. Events take place 3 months after Resident Evil 2. Claire finds herself being chased down in an Umbrella-owned facility while searching for her brother, Chris. After being captured, she is transported to Rockfort Island, where the only hope to escape is by surviving the sadistic games of a psychotic commander.
I so want to enjoy this.
With full 3D environments, epic cutscenes, and classic Resident Evil gameplay, it's no doubt this title was very well received upon release. But aside from all that, something else that really stood out was the music. Because of the seamless transitions between action sequences and actual gameplay, Code Veronica was not only a game, but it also gave the player a movie experience. In fact, the composers studied many tracks from action films in order to come up with the music you hear in the game now. In contrast, there was one piece in there which was carefully crafted into what gave Code Veronica that dreadful, eerie, and chills down your spine feeling: Alexia's Lullaby. Director Yasuhiro Sito describes it nicely, and I quote, "As it plays, you can hear the European operatic undertones that highlight the Gothic story, which underpins the story of a bloodline's collapse." Though despite how well the music and cutscenes set the creepy mood, you can always count on one person to ruin it all. Yep, Steve. His annoying voice, his whiny attitude, his awkward advances can be, at times, hard to watch. Interestingly, the devs specifically aimed to make Steve and Claire's relationship like brothers and sisters, at least through Claire's eyes. On the other hand, they purposely made Steve an impulsive young boy, self-conscious of his age, who had an impulsive crush on his beautiful partner in crime. According to Sito, he felt many males could relate to Steve because they've all experienced having a crush on an older woman, at least once in their youth.
Don't worry, Claire. Your knight in shining armor is here.
Believe it or not, there were story elements in Code Veronica that didn't make it into the final version, simply because the team didn't have enough time to complete it. Hence, a remake was released in 2001 called Code Veronica X for the PS2, Dreamcast, and later the GameCube, PS3, and Xbox 360 as well. Coincidentally, this was actually perfect timing since the Dreamcast was on its last legs, as it sadly discontinued in that same year. Main difference with this version are improved graphics and extra cutscenes which expanded the story. Well guys, that's it for today. So sorry for the late upload. We are planning to avoid 20-minute long videos and keep each part between 10 to 15 minutes max, and in turn, make more parts in each series for the future. This is so that we can upload content more consistently and frequently for you guys. So stay tuned, won't be long till the next video. I'll see you guys soon.